Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Great Shot, Kid, the show on the Nerd Party Network that is devoted to exploring the works of Star Wars creators and the Star Wars galaxy. I'm one of your hosts, John.
And I'm Mike.
And this week, we are going to be looking at a work from, we're continuing our series looking at the outside works of people who had a part in Rogue One, which was a highly successful Star Wars story, anthology, movie, whatever you want to call it. Jiang Wen, who has endeared himself to Star Wars fans the world over as the gruff Baze Malbus, protector of Donnie Yen's Chirrut Imwe. Now, we're going to be looking at a movie called Let the Bullets Fly, which is a film that Jiang Wen directed and stars in. The film was made over in China. It's a 2010 film. And before we talk about the film, though, what I wanted to ask you, Mike, was Jiang Wen. The first time I ever saw him was in Rogue One. Was that the first time you ever saw him in a film?
Yeah, it is. My earliest memories of Jiang Wen are when he told the world that Donnie Yen was going to die in Rogue One. And
Alan Tudyk's facial reaction was priceless.
It was amazing, yes.
Yeah.
And I've loved him ever since.
Yeah. It's such an innocent little flub. It really is. But yeah, Chirrut and Baze were probably my favorite part of Rogue One overall. I thought that Yen was great, and I really liked what he brought to the role of Baze Malbus. I didn't know so much about the his past film history. That it was an introduction. Now, did you go crazy for Chirrut and Baze the way so many others did?
Not so much. I mean, I didn't have anything against them. I thought that they were cool characters and stuff like that. I especially liked Chirrut, but it's not like I fell in love with them and started buying all their action figures or anything like that.
What kind of Star Wars fan are you if you didn't buy everybody's action figures, Mike? Come on.
I don't know.
That's just...
Sorry.
Come on.
Sorry.
You're better than that, man. Come on.
I guess so. Oh, next time I'll buy all the action figures.
Well, you're just saving up for the Sideshow Collectibles $600 inevitable.
Oh yeah,
bust of Jiang Wen as Baze Malbus, as we all are.
Of course.
So
yeah.
So Let the Bullets Fly. Do you want to give a brief synopsis of this film?
Sure. A band of bandits, I guess. Basically, they sort of kidnap a guy who's on his way to a town to become mayor, and they decide that they're going to kind of, take his place in order to profit off of this whole situation. And, sort of like the problem with this particular town is that it's being ruled by this, evil nobleman played by Chow Yun-fat, who, doesn't really want to give control over to a mayor.
Governor.
Okay.
Governor. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. It's I mean, that's a pretty straightforward way of looking at it. I would say that it's the first thing that really struck me about it was how, because having seen Jiang Wen give interviews for Rogue One and everything, seeing him so much more comfortable in his native language, was like, it was so noticeable. His nuance and his performance, like, it really, I think, shows that his performance as Baze really is terrific acting, because you just believe that the guy is like that, and then you see him in more, for lack of a better term, comfortable surroundings, and he comes to life. And he really has a real on-screen charisma, which is really fascinating to behold. I mean, arguably it comes through as Baze, but it was really something to see him be the leading man, as it were.
Yeah, no, I thought the exact same thing. I keep on thinking about that press conference, and
Mm-hmm.
like the whole time, like he even said it, right there, where he's like, I basically don't speak English here, so I'm really freaking nervous because I'm standing in front of 3,000 nerds and it's streaming to, a million people on the internet. And I basically, don't speak the language. And, that kind of comes through in the movie as well, where, even though obviously he can do as many takes as he needs in order to get the dialogue out, like, you can tell that he's not very comfortable with what it is he's saying, like you're saying, and I think, like, as an actor, a lot of his energy is being devoted to just like physically saying the words,
Yeah.
instead of, all of the emotion and everything which goes into acting, where, the thing that they tell you is, you memorize that stuff so that the words become, second nature.
Right.
And because you're not thinking about like the specific lines of dialogue, you're thinking about, everything that goes behind that.
Right.
And it's what you say because it's what your character would be saying or whatever.
And I think that there is a noticeable shift in the energy when he is in the dialogue-free moments, when it's action-driven and stuff like that. You can see a lot of that charisma from, something like Let the Bullets Fly, where you see him come to life because he doesn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So I think that supports your point. Now, Let the Bullets Fly, I want to get your read on it. My read on it was that I think that there is an inevitable cultural barrier for me in certain moments on the film. Like, I can get what's going on, and I'm not one of those people that shuts down when I watch a foreign film. I understand the rules are different sometimes and stuff like that. But with certain parts of this, I had a little bit of trouble coming at it from my own perspective. Did you encounter the same, or?
I don't really know how much of that has to do with culture. I think there were some weird choices which were made in the movie,
For sure.
But I think they had more to do with tone and stuff than they had to do with culture. And maybe that's a cultural thing. I don't know. But, like to me, like the things which stood out where I was kind of like, what's going on here, would be like, for the most part, it is a comedy, very
Yes.
much a comedy. If there was one thing which I did have trouble with, especially at the beginning of the movie, the dialogue is so fast. It's like a Howard Hawks movie, like a screwball comedy or something like that.
Yeah.
The dialogue is flying so fast that I literally could not keep up with the subtitles because it was just, so frenetic. But that's obviously not a fault of the filmmakers. It's just a fault of me not being able to speak the language or understand the language. But the one thing which kind of stood out to me as weird is, with all that comedy, there were moments of like tragedy, where like characters who we get to know very, very well are immediately and suddenly killed. And the moments are almost played for laughs. And it's like, that's weird because there's like no shift in tone, even though like the action on screen, in my mind, kind of demands it.
Yeah, what's interesting is I really do think sometimes that it's the translation is difficult because you get a lot of nuance lost in a translation. I'll never forget taking a Shakespeare class a very long time ago, where the teacher taught us a phrase that would have been regarded in Renaissance times forward of translator equals traitor. That the reason people were obsessive about speaking multiple languages was because they didn't trust anybody to get all of the nuance of what was being said. Was it a joke? Was it, how serious were they being? And I think that this reminds me of, I can't remember the name of it. It was an anime film many years ago where the translation that was on screen was nice right hook, but now I'm going to kill you and get on with my life. And I remember that moment so many years ago thinking to myself, that cannot be exactly what they really meant to say. And I think that there are problems in this film in the sense that, like you said, there are these fast-moving moments where I knew, like the dinner scene, or where he's telling the real governor who's pretending to be the counselor, make him translate it. Tell me what he said. Tell me what and like it's going back and forth, and the transliteration of the lines, I'm like, this is not working. Mm-hmm. But it still kind of worked, because by that point in the film, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I just got to go with the flow, with the feel of what they're trying to set up here, as opposed to the words that are being fed to me.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and yeah, that scene that you're talking about, I definitely kind of got that impression too. But I don't know. I don't think it's completely that, because there's a lot of stuff which has sort of nothing to do with the dialogue which is being spoken. It's almost like the physical, humor, mm-hmm. which is at play, which really doesn't work well tonally. But for the most part, yeah. I mean, I thought that it was, a pretty solid movie.
I wasn't nuts about it, because even, setting aside some of those challenges, there were things I just didn't like. The trial of, who was it, number 6 that he regarded as his son, mm-hmm. was number 6, right?
I can't remember exactly. Yeah.
Or was it number 2? Because number 2, number 2.
Right. I think it was number 6. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the trial that he has, where he cuts himself open to prove that he only had one bowl of jelly. Mm-hmm. Like, that scene was just absolutely baffling to me, and the placement of it, like it was one of those things where I was like, there are a whole lot of different things that could have happened to get that character into a different situation. And there were also moments where the impression I was left with was I kind of got an insight as to why, because there are times now where a movie comes out here, say a Michael Bay movie, where we're like, ha, this is Dadaist nonsense. This barely makes sense. This is just all camera movements and all of that. And then I watched this and I was like, huh, that's kind of like a Michael Bay movie.
But see, that's
kind of makes sense now.
That's the thing that I kind of liked about it. I mean, like, it starts up and, there's like this crazy sequence with like a train, which is
pulled by horses,
which is like catapulted into like a pond and stuff like that. And, it's like terrible, terrible effects, but, whatever. They didn't have a lot of money to make this thing, I'm assuming. And, it's an ambitious project and, whatever. I can forgive that.
Sure. Yeah.
But, like the action sequences and everything, I thought were like really well done. It reminded me a lot of like John Woo with, the gunfights and stuff like
sure.
that. And I thought that those were pretty fantastic. And it was weird because the whole time that I was watching it, I kept on thinking like, okay, he directed this movie himself. And yet they made a big deal, like in the press leading up to the release of Rogue One, that he had never seen a Star Wars movie before.
Yes.
And, they talked about how Gareth Edwards was like, don't watch it until we're done making it, just because I think that's funny, like that sort of thing. And I'm like, wow, like when I first heard that he was directing, anytime that they say like, oh, an actor is, directing this movie, I think it's going to be small, it's going to be quiet, it's going to be a character, actor-driven piece. There's probably not going to be a lot of visual flourish or anything like that. And that's not the case at all with this movie, I mean, yeah. It's a very, very solid-looking movie.
There's actually something about the action sequences and the effects that I was wondering, and I have not been able to find anything to corroborate this. This is just crazy thought in my head. But one of the things I was wondering was, paying attention to the fact that the gunshots are all CG, the explosions are all CG, everything's CG. I almost wonder, and I have nothing to base this on, I almost wonder if those things are so regulated by the Chinese government that they couldn't get, like functional explosives and stuff like that. That doesn't make sense to me on one level, but why would you cheat out something as basic as just a practical explosion effect? Right?
I mean, were they all like that? I don't know.
Yeah, like maybe. The gunshots were all of the gunshots that I saw were CG, and if I recall correctly, there's one point near the end where you see Chow Yun-fat chamber a round, and I'm pretty certain that the round you see get chambered is CG because it looked CG.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really notice that, but I mean, there definitely was a lot of CG in it, but I guess I didn't really notice that. But
I almost wonder what, like, there was one train effect or, not train effect, but one explosion effect in the beginning where like an alarm clock shot up in the air that was CG.
Mm-hmm.
Was this 3D in China? I couldn't find anything saying whether this was released in 3D or not, because a lot of these effects I was like, this looks like it's being cheated out for 3D.
I don't know about that, but in a way it wouldn't really surprise me because 3D is rather huge over in China. Like a lot of movies, like the reason why they shoot them or whatever, master them in 3D is just so that they can release them in China. Looking at the specs on IMDb, I don't see 3D listed at all. It was shot on 35 millimeter, but I don't see anything about it actually being in 3D. But it wouldn't surprise me because 3D is huge. I mean, there's a lot of movies which have been post converted to 3D just for the Chinese release. The reason why we're getting Terminator 2, it's because Cameron wants it in 3D, but the reason why they were able to justify the expense of converting it to 3D is for the Chinese market. So, China loves 3D. They really, really do. But I don't know. It's just weird, though. I mean, talking about like even the fact that this might be a 3D movie and that there is so much CGI and everything like that. Like, you would think, whether or not he's even interested in the subject matter, that a filmmaker who's making movies on this scale, you would think that they would have seen a Star Wars movie, just because that's a thing that exists, right? I mean, you almost, just more for just like everyone's seen Citizen Kane, or anything like that. It's very strange.
I think that it really does speak to, and you had cited this in a previous conversation, the bubble that we can live in sometimes. Yeah, Star Wars is a big worldwide phenomenon. Yeah, but it's not quite as culturally ensconced, in other countries as it might be here. Like it is definitely something. I mean, one other interesting thing, while I took the pot shot and I said, it looked like a Michael Bay movie, there were certain aspects of this where I could see Asian cinema's influence on Lucas even more clearly, because there were a lot of things where I was like, oh, wow, yeah, okay. Like I can see where this not this film in specific, obviously, but I could see sort of the cultural influence that Asian cinema had on the way Lucas put, a lot of his Star Wars work together.
Well, yeah, and I think that it's interesting that this is basically a Western, and there's obviously like a lot of crossover between, like Asian cinema and Westerns and everything like that. And there's a lot of crossover between George Lucas and Westerns, and George Lucas and Asian cinema. So like there's that Venn diagram, and Star Wars falls, I guess, right in the middle of it all, right? So
it sort of does. I mean, it's really interesting too, because one of the things that I picked up on, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but there seemed to be a touch of cultural revolution about the character's motivations once he became governor, where he remained governor, but his whole thing was telling people that nobody is above anybody and everybody is equal and everybody will make the same. Like, it really sort of read a lot like informed by, in that sense, Chinese culture, which, post-communist revolution, the Cultural Revolution, I would think that, I guess it speaks to something that I've tried to look for, is more and more Chinese companies are investing in American film. Are we going to see people backing off of certain criticisms of things and an advancement of certain ideas to keep getting that money and keep playing in that market? And that was just something that jumped out at me while I was watching it. I was like, huh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like a lot of times with a Western, when the person comes in, it's like I'm going to get rid of the bad guy, but it's so everybody can go off and live their own life. Whereas this one, he's like, I'm going to get rid of the bad guy so that we can all live equally and exactly the same as everybody else. It's like, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, there could be something to that. I mean, I'm honestly not that up on Chinese history and everything, and I don't know too much about the time period even or anything like that this movie takes place in,
Right,
and also how that relates to today. But I mean, there's certainly things which I think are going to be done in order to cater to the Chinese. I mean, already are being done in order to cater to the Chinese market. I mean, you look at things like Iron Man 3, where they had like a whole subplot which had basically no place in the movie, but starred two of the biggest actors in China, just so that they could get that sort of like star power into the market. I mean, there's things which are happening that way. Whether or not it'll happen with content, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if China can make Facebook and Google start to play along with what they want, undeniably movies will start to go down that road as well.
Yeah.
They will fold a lot faster than Facebook and Google will. That's for certain.
Could be. Yeah. No, it's interesting.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting play. So, it was a fair amount of effort for us to get to see Let the Bullets Fly. Because it's not streaming.
It is. Yeah.
It is streaming?
Yeah, I rented
streaming?
it off of iTunes.
Oh, okay. See,
Yeah.
I got the disc off of Netflix.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
iTunes is not very much.
iTunes.
More and more, I find out I need to like keep iTunes front of mind because I keep sort of like screwing myself up with this.
That's where I always go to first, just because it looks the best on my system. Although I hear there's a rumor, and this is slightly off topic, but there's a rumor that come this fall, there's going to be an Amazon Prime app available on the Apple TV, so that could be a game changer right there.
That could be. I don't have an Apple TV, but I suppose if I got one, it would probably go a great way toward cutting the cable from the cable companies.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, like you look at Stars and everything is something which I've been watching recently, and the quality is just as good as the cable stuff. So
would you say to somebody that it's worth going to the effort to see this?
I would recommend it. I mean, it's interesting. I'd say on the whole, it's a good movie. It's pretty funny, and the action sequences are pretty well done. Chow Yun-fat, plays the bad guy, and he's excellent in this.
He plays two roles in this, actually.
Yeah, he does. And apparently, I mean, I guess it makes sense with Chow Yun-fat being in it and everything, but like this was, it says on, IMDb, up until 2011 at least, it was the highest grossing domestic release in China ever,
Wow.
So that's pretty impressive. But I didn't think it was outstanding, but it is kind of cool. I mean, just like we're doing here, and trying to like see where all of these, character actors, came from in Rogue One, since they really were, aside from like Alan Tudyk, a bunch of kind of like no-name actors. I mean, aside from like the big leads like Diego Luna and stuff. But, it's cool. And I mean, there's a history, I think, with Star Wars and sort of its place in world cinema in a sense, or, the idea that it definitely sort of, finds the best talent in around the globe, not just locally, and incorporates all that stuff, because I mean, when you've got $15 billion to spend on the making of a movie, you can do that, and I think that
cast a wide net, yeah.
And I think that it's cool that people like Jiang Wen are kind of getting exposure. I mean, I saw someone on Twitter, because obviously I don't just follow Star Wars people. I also follow a lot of like really, really big film nerds, and they're like, there's a movie which is #1 at the box office right now, which stars, Jiang Wen and Donnie Yen. That's insane, And
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool that sort of like the rest of the world is getting to see these people. So, yeah.
Yeah, the phrase I used for it was that it's sporadically compelling and interesting, and it is. I mean, there are parts where I was kind of like not with it, but then there are certain scenes where, like the dinner scene, and pretty much anytime Zhang Wen and Chow Yun Fat are interacting, the movie comes alive, just like pops alive.
Yeah, the two of them are so good, and just seeing them go like head to head, as actors. And I mean, like even Chow Yun Fat, who's always amazing. I've loved him, ever since. The first thing that I saw him in was The Replacement Killers, which is very similar to this movie in a lot of ways in terms of the action and stuff like that. But again, just like we were talking about with Zhang Wen, him getting to act in his native language, he definitely opens up a lot.
Yes.
I mean, he's playing two roles which are extremely distinct from one another, and he's excellent in both of them. And it's pretty awesome to see him on screen.
Yeah. So get your iTunes or your Netflix disc and and check it out. See if it works for you. And if it does work for you, you can go ahead and reach out to us at thenerdparty.com/contact. Drop us a line here at Great Shot Kid. Let us know, what you thought of it. Let us know what you thought of Zhang Wen as Baze Malbus as well. You can also reach out to us on Twitter through the network's Twitter handle at Join Nerd Party. You can find us on Instagram at The Nerd Party. And use the hashtag #GreatShotKid if you want to call our attention over there. And you can go to Facebook at facebook.com/thenerdparty and comment on the show posts and other links that we put up there. So that's how they can reach us through the official channels. Mike, where can they find you out there on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K, and you can also find me on TalkFilmSociety.com, where I do Soderbergh 2828, and you can find me on CommentaryTrackStars.com, where I do Commentary Trackstars, and you can find me on Trek.fm, where I do Stage 9 with you.
That's right. We do Stage 9 over on Trek.fm, which is basically the same premise of this show, but for Star Trek creators. It's a lot of fun. You should check it out. Staying here on the Nerd Party Network, you can find me with Matt Rushing co-hosting Aggressive Negotiations, which is more of a general and obscure and weird topic Star Wars show. And you can find me co-hosting Words with Nerds with my pal Craig, where we go pretty off every topic weekly over there. And you can look for Castle Junkie. I'm out and about on your social network of choice. So thank you for joining us for this discussion of Let the Bullets Fly. Join us next time for a very, very special episode where we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of Star Wars in our own way by putting ourselves in the hypothetical, theoretical, whatever word is proper for it, situation of we're making the original Star Wars, but today, and who would we cast?